What is up? Felix Fleer here for the R-Imprint radio show on Rinse France. Today we have a super exciting program. Our first guest is going to be James Shaw, better known as Sigha. He started gaining international recognition as a producer back in 2009 when Scuba signed him for his first release on Hot Flush Recordings. What followed were several EPs and a debut album by the name of Living with Ghosts, as well as 2 releases on James Ruskin's label Blueprint and the start of his own label Our Circula Sound. In 2015 he joined the Token Records family and has since then been busy with shaping the label's sound with a steady output of some of the most forward-thinking and refined techno cuts out there. So, hey James, pleased to meet you. Nice that you made it to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, really good. Thank you for inviting me on, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first I wanted to speak to you a bit about your work as a solo artist. I've actually been following your work for quite a while already, including your days on Hot Flush, but it must have been around the time of your first release on Token Records that you really stood out to me as an artist with a very unique signature kind of style. So would you agree with my assessment of this being a particularly important step in your artistic journey?
It was important for sure, definitely. I mean, I think that there were kind of there'd been a number of, I guess, significant sort of steps and moments, but this release, you mean The Better Way of Living, Our Father 12, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. This was the first 12 that I did with Chris at Token. And I mean, I'd known Chris for quite a while. We'd been talking about maybe doing something for quite a long time before that, but when I finished both those tracks, it was kind of really clear to me that they would be something that would kind of make sense on Token. And I mean, Chris agreed, but I mean, for me, the reason why that was such an important, I guess, release is it was the kind of start of that relationship that I built with Chris. And I mean, he's someone that I think has been really important in, I guess, giving me the space to develop a sound palette and kind of various, I guess, techniques and things like that. He gives his artists the space basically to work. He doesn't kind of like get up in their face or anything like that. Like he trusted me to create and to write and gave me the space to breathe with the album, with the various 12s and stuff like that. So I mean, it was really important as a platform, and that was the start of that.
So since 2015 you've been putting out one solo record on the label every year. Will 2019 continue like that?
Let's see. I mean, Chris and I have already spoken about doing something this year, but it's just a question of whether schedules line up. I mean, it's crazy how far in advance you got to think about these things. Like, it still baffles me, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to do something again with Chris. Like, and if it doesn't happen this year, I'm sure it will happen next year, you know.
So around the time of the release of Christ Figure, you said in one of your interviews that you were especially inspired by your research in different religions and all that kind of stuff. So I was wondering what other things besides from music are inspiring you and fascinating you in the moment?
I mean, I guess it's maybe seems like a little bit of a cop-out answer, but really the world around us at the minute and the way it's kind of developing, not always in a positive way, which I guess maybe seems negative to take inspiration from that, but I don't really mean it in that sense. Like, I just kind of think it's fascinating the way the world seems to be turning into this slightly horrible dystopian future that I kind of grew up reading about, you know, in all these kind of like pulp science fiction sort of novels and stuff like that. Like, you know, and the way that technology increasingly seems to be shaping us, whether we like it or not, you know, through things like obviously social media and how it's kind of like shaping the geopolitical landscape, as well as people's self-images and stuff like that through Instagram and things, you know, right the way through to like AI and development of that, and how that's kind of like having a massive impact on things. I mean, that's something I'm finding really fascinating at the minute. And then there's all the usual stuff like films and you know, art and all the stuff I banged on about in the past before. But I've definitely been, I guess, more engaged with what's actually going on around me than kind of like I have been in the past. And I think that's kind of coming out in what I'm writing at the minute.
So when it comes to finding your own voice as an artist, if there was one thing that you wish you would have learned earlier, what would that thing be? Probably for all the aspiring artists out there that are listening right now.
I mean, it sounds like an obvious one maybe, but really listen to yourself and create what makes you happy, I guess. I mean, everyone, I think, needs to, as almost a learning process, go through a phase of like imitation, you know, where you listen to certain artists that you love and you want to make music like that, and that's normal and that's great. Like that's I think that's how people really learn their chops. But you know, I think it's important at a certain stage to really be honest with yourself about what you want to hear, because it might not always be what you feel you should be writing, and what maybe, you know, your peers are doing and stuff like that. So I think just be true to yourself and be honest and write from the heart. And that, I mean, that sounds incredibly cheesy, but I really believe that. And I mean, that's something that took me a long time to realize. But when I did, like, I mean, I think not only hopefully my output got better, but I felt much happier, like, in myself.
Mm-hmm. So how long did it take you from starting to work on your own music until you kind of reached that point where you said, this is like authentically what I want to express, in a sense?
I mean, honestly, like, it wasn't there when I was releasing music to start with, for sure, because I mean the whole thing is a learning curve, you know. I mean, I remember when I very first started putting out records with Hot Flush. I mean, I wasn't making anything that I wasn't happy with, but I was making a lot of things that didn't fit in with what I kind of wanted to do creative. I was just enjoying making music, which is great. But then, you know, you're like, you I guess slightly kind of spellbound by the whole novelty of someone wanting to put out your tunes, you know. So you're slightly less protective of, well, I think this one should come out, this one shouldn't come out. I mean, that was the kind of, I guess, first learning process of, like, looking back. Like, I kind of feel like my early discography was a little bit like all over the place in a way that, like, even at the time I wouldn't have really wanted per se, but I was just so happy that Paul Scuba wanted to release these tracks, you know. And I mean, that's not taking anything away from him wanting to, you know, having wanted to put out my music. Like, I'm still really grateful that he supported me so much, you know, back in the early days. But I think it's just I mean, that was kind of like the start of a learning curve of, I guess, just learning to yeah, I mean, exactly what you asked in the question, have your own voice, basically, and not necessarily like totally rely on other people.
Yeah. So also I noticed that it was around of the time that you started working more intensively with Token Records that you kind of stopped focusing on the label that you founded yourself called Our Circula Sound. But now it came to my attention that you want to relaunch the label in the near future. So I was wondering, what were the reasons why you put the project on hold, and why are you picking it up again?
So that is happening, yes. Like, we haven't actually announced it officially yet, but I'm definitely kicking the label off again. The first release is all finalised, mastered. I just finally approved the artwork today. So yeah, it's exciting. But I mean, I guess I ended it or stopped it because I just started to get really kind of fatigued with the logistical side of the thing. Like, the distributor we were working with was becoming increasingly problematic. Like, they ended up folding. I mean, so many labels go through the same thing. Like, and it was really like energy draining, basically dealing with this kind of operation. And so I decided just to put it on ice for a little bit and just focus on making music. And I mean, that decision, I think, at the time was a really good one, because it really gave me the kind of space I needed to I guess develop my sound and to learn really like a lot more about engineering and production. And it's enabled me to do things now, like that intensive time that maybe I wouldn't have been able to if half my time was taken up dealing with label things. But yeah, I mean, I decided at the start of the year that maybe the time was right to get it going again. I mean, I've been working on a lot of music that's really personal, and there's been a slight kind of shift in direction. I've got a good team around me as well, so I kind of thought, well, you know, like now it's not all just going to be on my shoulders. Like, you know, I'll have more time in the studio, not just kind of like dealing with label issues and stuff. Like, it feels like now is a good time to kind of get it going again.
And do you already have some sort of specific musical vision in mind? And if so, how is it going to differ from what we've previously heard on the label a couple of years ago? I'm sure you've been developing yourself and your tastes quite a lot in that time.
Yeah, so I mean, OCS before was a very techno-centric label. I mean, towards the end of the kind of first run of releases, it started to open up a little bit with my positive centers stuff and things. But overall, it was very techno-centric, and I think while techno will be a feature of I guess the second incarnation, because I mean really the label will be a reflection of my tastes, and obviously I love techno, it's not just going to be centered around, you know, I guess more traditional techno stuff. You know, I mean, for me, I think the way a lot of techno has kind of developed in recent years, I guess, is I haven't necessarily been totally into it. I mean, the scene's kind of grown exponentially. It's crazy, but at the same time, I think that's kind of come at a cost of certain things. Like BPMs have gone up so much, things have become harder and harder. It's all stuff that, I mean, some people maybe are really into, but for me, it just is almost the antithesis of what I like, because I got into techno because of the nuance that was there and things, and I think this kind of like almost homogenization of the kind of the mainstream underground, in inverted commas, if you want to call it that, like has started to sap that kind of like nuance and interest away from it. So I mean, really, I mean that's this kind of central idea behind the label. It's just it's somewhere that I can put music out from myself and from friends that kind of has retained this, you know. I mean, whether it's techno or whether it's ambient or whether it's whatever, you know, IDM, whatever, like, you know, it just needs to have that kind of, I guess, depth and nuance to it.
Do you sometimes think about the development of techno just from a purely musical standpoint? Like, for example, do you anticipate a sort of bigger artistic revolution in the future? Like, for example, it happened in hip-hop with the trap movement that kind of suddenly updated the whole genre to a new level. Do you think something like that is possible with techno, or do you think it's more like due to the futuristic nature of techno that we are always trying to update it constantly, and therefore it always feels not like such a sudden progress that would be so noticeable?
That's a hard one. I mean, on the one hand, if you know, if I knew kind of what the next trends were going to be, I guess I'd be a wealthy person. But like, you know, it's so hard to predict these things, you know. I mean, I never in a million years would have imagined techno would ever get to the size it's got now. I mean, to be honest, it seems to be in a lot of areas like replacing EDM. You know, this kind of like more, I guess, big stadium-esque kind of like rave techno. I never could, even in the incarnation that is, where it's kind of like I say, it's lost the nuance. It's kind of like it's all about the impact and the kind of the big build-ups and the what. Even with that, I never would have imagined that it could have grown to the size it has. Not because I don't have belief in techno, but I guess more because of a lack of faith in human taste, like, you know, because to me, I mean, there's, like I say, there's been compromises in the genre, to me anyway, to get it to that size, but I mean, it's still lacking so much of other genre, you know, other kind of, I guess, what other genres bring to that same kind of arena, you know, whether it's kind of very hooky or kind of like, you know, huge mid-range or whatever, you know. It's ostensibly, it's still quite stripped back and quite like reductionist compared to a lot of other, you know, I guess big EDM style rave music. So I mean, where it's going to go from here, I don't know. But things tend to move in cycles. Things are cyclical, and so if you look at the last time, techno, I guess, I mean, in its kind of current sort of phase, current stylistically, kind of blew up to the extent, or even not quite to this extent, that it has now, then there was a big backlash against it, like not so long after that, it's not going to be like it is now forever, for sure. And I think what actually will happen is, like, the kind of the punters and kids in the raves will end up getting bored and look for something else, and the scene will kind of like collapse in on itself a little bit. It will kind of drift back more into what we understand of as the underground, rather than the kind of, I guess, huge festivals and kind of raves that exist now. And then things will start getting reinvented in that sense. That's kind of how I see things moving. But maybe you're right. Maybe there will be like some huge new kind of like take on it that will reinvigorate it without it having to kind of shrink and grow back again.
I guess we'll inevitably find out in the future.
Totally. Sorry, maybe it would have been easier just to say I don't know.
No, I think it was actually quite an interesting take. So, and probably also a realistic one, because every bubble will have to burst eventually. So, how satisfied are you with the quality of techno right now? There's a lot of people that say it's like it used to be a lot more original and now everything sounds the same, but I kind of wholeheartedly disagree with that assessment, because, like, from all the techno that I've listened to from all the different eras, almost all of my favorite tracks have been written within the last couple of years, because it gets like increasingly more complex and artistic. So what's your opinion on that matter?
I mean, I think that for sure there is more stuff that sounds the same about, but I think the reason for that is just because there's more stuff about. Like, it's like there's, the methods of making electronic music now are so much more available. I mean, it is just than they were even, like, I guess even, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, however far you want to go back. That of course there's going to be more techno there, and that means that there's going to be more, sort of samey, boring, in inverted commas, stuff there. But equally, if you dig a little bit harder, there's also going to be more interesting stuff. It just sometimes, I mean, it's easy to get kind of tired and jaded on it when you have to wade through, so much more, I guess, I mean, dross, basically, to find the stuff that's interesting. But I do think there's more of that there, just because there's more people making music. So of course there's going to be more great stuff. You just need to work a little bit harder to find it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So then another thing I wanted to talk to you about is your collaboration with Kangding Ray. Most people will have already noticed that you started a project Neon Chambers a while ago. So first of all, how did the collaboration with you come about?
So we were invited to play ADE last year, and the initial kind of idea was they wanted us to play back to back, and I spoke to David, and pretty quickly it became clear that maybe it would be more interesting for both of us if we kind of thought about doing something live together. Which I guess was, I mean, it was a little bit like ambitious, considering, I mean, it was funny. I knew David before this, obviously, but it wasn't like we'd hung out heaps or anything like that. We knew and respected each other's work, and we'd, met in Schneider's and talked about synths and bumped into each other at gigs and clubs and hung out a little bit. But it wasn't like we were, super close, and he'd say the same thing. But after kind of like quite a long initial Skype call, we kind of came to the conclusion, like I say, that we'd find it more fulfilling to, rather than like doing, just like another DJ set, to try and prepare something like creatively a little bit more interesting for us. And I mean, not that I don't love DJing, obviously, but you know what I mean. As soon as we kind of actually spent some studio time together, it kind of like really clicked and became pretty clear that we just got lucky basically, because it became really clear that we were really compatible creatively, and that we were pushing towards something that we both had very much like a similar end goal in mind. It could have gone totally wrong. It could have gone totally the other way, but for whatever reason, like the stars aligned and it worked out for us.
Yeah. So Kangding Ray also mentioned in one of his interviews recently that your collaborative music is in a sense bigger than the sum of its parts, and therefore like stuff that you both couldn't achieve on your own in a sense. So if you had to conceptualize it, what would you say are the unique elements that you both bring to the table, and how would you describe the unique synergy that develops between them?
Yeah, I mean that's another kind of like really difficult thing to put one's finger on, basically. Like, it sounds kind of really vague, I guess, but I think it really is just a case of when the right minds kind of come together. It's just that alchemy, basically. I've always been pretty skeptical. I think I've said before as well, I've always been pretty skeptical of collaboration in general. But I've been 100% proved wrong basically with this, because I think it is just a case of really finding the right, partner or partners in the project. And I think also what helped is when like I say, when we both sat down in the first writing sessions, we both knew that we wanted to do something really outside of our comfort zone and away from what people knew us for separately, and so having a sounding board in the other kind of person there that you not only kind of really trust creatively and respect, but also works as a kind of like a weird amplifier for those kind of instincts of moving away from what your normal comfort zone is really invaluable. Because if I hadn't have had David there in the studio when we started working on Neon Chambers, it would have been so easy to kind of to slip back into modes of working that I already knew, and I felt comfortable, and I knew, okay, well, I know if I do this that will work, and but having someone there who also wanted to break out of those kind of those I guess not ruts, but those kind of tropes and methods of working, like it was really it was so useful, because it just meant basically we were both pushing each other in that kind of sense. And I guess especially with the first with the first 2 or 3 like week-long studio sessions we had, it really was a case of like anything went. Like we could try anything. There was no kind of like, we were throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick, basically. I think, we had a lot of ideas that we kind of knew where we wanted to get to, but how we were going to get there, we were very open to kind of experimenting, and it was, like I said, it was helpful to have someone there who was open to going on that journey and kind of open to pushing you and kicking me in the arse when I was like, oh, maybe we should just do this. It's like, no, we're going to keep going.
Yeah. So now that we've all seen like little clips from your live performances pop up on social media, a lot of people, including me, are eagerly waiting for the first Neon Chambers release in the future. Is there anything planned in that regard?
Absolutely, for sure. We're sitting on quite a lot of material, actually. But really quite a lot. But we're just kind of taking our time and working out the best way to get it out there, really, I guess. We've been insanely lucky enough that the response, even without a release out there, or it's literally only, like you were saying, just like little clips on social media of like live videos and stuff. There's not really anywhere someone can go and go, okay, so this is what the project sounds like. And we've been really lucky that even just with that situation, it's been so well received, and we've been able to travel with the project and tour it. So, given that, we haven't felt pressured into rushing anything out that we don't have to, we want to take our time with it and do it right, which is, it's a really privileged situation to be in, but luckily, somehow, magically, we found ourselves in it, and so we want to do it right, Yeah,
cool. So then I'm looking forward to hearing it in the maybe distant future, maybe not so distant.
Hopefully not too distant. When I say we want to take our time, I mean we're already thinking about it. You know, like it's something that will be on the cards in the not too distant future. Let's say, I think, in one way or another.
Okay, so then one last question. Can you already tell me a bit about the music that you have prepared for the show today?
Yeah, so I really wanted to put a mix together that kind of, I guess, showcased a lot of the sets that I've been playing recently. I mean, in the last few weeks, I've had some really killer shows, and I kind of wanted to bring a little bit of that kind of vibe here. I mean, some of the mixes I've done in the past, I guess, have been more focused on, I guess, almost, I mean, not just headphone listening, but there's definitely been a kind of a vibe there where it's definitely, okay, so this is a podcast, not something maybe that would be a club orientated techno set. But I wanted to maybe push the balance a little bit more with this towards what you would hear me play in a club.
Okay, so yeah, excited to hear it. I think enough of the words. It was very pleasant to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Great, thank you very much.